Well, okay. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Charlie Bloom. I'm with the State of Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. I'm on the licensing team, and presenting with me today will be Carrie Pohjola. I'll let Carrie introduce herself. So again, my name is Charlie. I'm a licensing specialist right now. I had started off my environmental health career as a retail and rec sanitarian with Waukesha County Health Department. Then took the job with DadCap and did manufactured food inspections with the state and the city of Milwaukee for about 3 years. And then at that time, couple 2 3 years ago, I did end up becoming a licensing specialist. So while I was in the city, I did do a number of the larger macro breweries, the larger ones in the city. So took a look at a lot of those and kind of saw what was going on. As we kind of take a look here, this is my team. So the team that I'm a part of, I'm on the internal operations section, but we have Nicole. She's one of our licensing specialists, myself, and then Dan Warglet is a regulatory specialist, but he assists us in answering those licensing questions and watching that mailbox. And you might hear from any one of us if you're submitting questions, calling us, any of those things. So. I'll let Carrie here introduce her team and kind of talk about that quick.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're happy you're here. I am Carrie Pohjola. I am one of the 6 retail food technical specialists. I started my career many moons ago with the city of Menasha. Before that, I did do an internship with Department of Health, and I just kind of have stuck around since I left City of Menasha with Department of Health, and then I came over to DATCAP when we merged. Some of the other specialists is our up north, Mark Jenko. If you have equipment committee questions along with Charlie, he is your go-to person. We have Lisa Lucht in the northeast part of the state. She started just a little bit before me. Mark started around the same time as me. We have Katie Matulis, who we swiped up from City of Milwaukee many years ago, as well as Michael Otzelberger. He's in the Milwaukee area, another great grab from City of Milwaukee. Kara Paul, who's over on this side of the state with me, and finally, myself. So welcome, we're happy to have you here this morning.
Okay, first thing we're going to talk about is DATCAP, our mission and vision. I like to start every presentation with these ideas, with this in mind as we move through this presentation as kind of a large umbrella view of what we talk about here. With the mission, I always like to talk about, we're really trying to grow the economy and promoting that quality food, healthy plants and animals, and in a fair marketplace. With the vision, you can see that there on your screen. I really like to highlight the efficient and effective programs and services that we provide. We're really trying to make sure that you not only get like the right answer, but you're also getting the correct answer, right? So we're having that conversation, making sure that we're communicating and getting it to the right folks to get the right questions answered. I also like to talk about kind of moving down from DADCAP as an agency down to the Department of Food and Recreational Services. So our mission and vision, and really kind of highlighting the fair, effective, and efficient manner. I think it's worth pointing out that that's on both of those slides. I think that's something that we take very seriously. And then the vision, that overarching kind of philosophy we're looking at, is making sure that we're a national leader in supporting the growth and safe operation of diverse food, lodging, and recreational businesses. And certainly as you do your inspections, as you do licensing, as you're getting these ideas in, I think we can all agree, we're really getting a good amount of that diverse ideas and kind of seeing all there is that people want to do and want to do safely as well. Okay, so this is our flow for today and objectives we'll have for the presentation. We will follow up at the end with questions and kind of take those. If there's anything we can't answer, we're going to use our resources. We're going to email, phone call, and get back to you with that correct answer in a efficient time frame. Something we want to really highlight is especially as we're going to these breweries and brewing areas, if in some of these cases, if you're not going into these brewing areas, nobody else is. So we really want to make sure that we're helping you out for what we want to look at, how we're going to triage during licensing, and then Carrie's going to touch on equipment, common violations in the brewery, and then food hazards that you really want to take a look at. We're really striving for it to be a risk-based inspection and to keep that philosophy, keep that motive going when you're in a brewery versus, a restaurant or just a restaurant or whatever it may be. So still having that same uh, attitude as you're going through it. But this is what we're going to be touching on today. So you want to brew beer. The first thing that we're going to have to talk to people about is, you're going to talk to multiple regulatory agencies. That's just part of the nature of brewing beer, of creating or manufacturing an alcoholic product. Brewing is still on the rise. In 1978, we had as few as 98 breweries nationwide. Numbers for 2024 were 9,709. 269 breweries in Wisconsin as of January 2024. I still think this is trending upwards. I don't have data for 2025, but I can imagine that it still is. The first thing we want to talk about is that alcohol is food, right? So that is something that is defined in our state statute. Food means article used for food or drink by persons. Chewing gum, and then C of that is articles used for components of matter specified in paragraph A and B. So referencing back to itself as we're talking about that. We really want to make sure that we're getting them the correct license. So we're going through that triage process. We need to make sure that they hold a retail or a food processing plant license. And at the end, I'll touch on the TTB, and so that's the Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau and what they're looking at and what they're working with the Department of Revenue on to make sure that that's all making sense and that's all working together in that kind of streamlined process. So the first I wanted to do is talk about retail and wholesale on a high level. When we're talking about a retail food establishment, we're talking about something where you're doing primarily retail direct-to-consumer sales and can produce meals. So a retail food establishment can wholesale up to 25% of their gross food sales, but we're not talking about meat products, standard of identity dairy products, and then we have several products that require additional training / regulation. So if you remember me talking about Awiha, that we're talking about the juice and the seafood types of landscapes. So that's what we're kind of looking at when we're talking about that little asterisk up there. You also can't complete canning operations. Now, we're not talking about canning as in canning beer. We are talking about canning as in you are acidifying a product. So that's something different that we are not going to touch on today. So when we're looking at a brewery, what we're asking them or the operator, maybe it's a licensing or maybe it's somebody in production, but we're asking what their projection of sales are going to be or what they already are selling. So are you largely retail? Are you wholesale, right? We want to make sure that if it's a retail food establishment, maybe it's a not serving meals. If they're primarily selling beer, they're primarily selling it on site and they're doing it direct to consumer, we would allow them to do that 25% of the gross food sales as that wholesale operation. Now, when we're talking about wholesale, so you can see on the slide there, the flip side of that coin, if you will, we're primarily relinquishing control of food items, right? To grocery stores, gas stations, distributors, different bars, restaurants, whatever it may be. And they cannot produce meals. So that's something important that we might at a distinction if we're going to a brewery or a macro, bigger brewery, maybe they are having a restaurant on site. That is a conversation we'll have with, okay, you can't produce meals underneath your food processing plant license, but that is a situation you might have to get that retail food establishment license. So really, if the brewery is falling underneath the auspices of a retail license, you'll be going in to look at the beer brewing process, equipment, and then those associated hazards. And that's really what we're trying to talk about here today. So that's kind of the breakdown and what we're going to be asking, and that's something I'll typically ask anybody who's coming in and asking about producing these alcoholic products. What are you producing, and what's your sales, and kind of make a determination from that point forward. So one of the things that we talk about is a brewery versus a brew pub. This did change last year with the passing of Act 73. So I was doing a little bit of research on that. Um, you know, as I was getting ready for this presentation, but that allows there's a couple things that changed with this. So before it was couldn't sell intoxicating liquors at that brewery, but now if you are doing, it's a certain number of thresholds. So producers to have a full service retail sales can now sell their alcoholic beverages directly to consumer and up to 3 offsite retail locations. But to sell those alcoholic beverages not produced on site, producers must meet specific production thresholds. So that's 250 barrels of beer, 150 liters of liquor, or 1,000 gallons of wine for wineries. So that's something to keep in the back of your head as you're kind of looking at this. I did find a great sheet from DOR that I'm happy to share that goes through. It actually lays it out with type of activity, and then it talks about a brewer versus a brew pub. So I think that was a really great resource and made a lot of sense to me and kind of helped me make a little bit easier as I'm going through this. So the big thing is that a brew pub does need to hold a retail or restaurant license. So that is something that they will need to keep in mind as they are moving forward with this process, with this licensing process, is that they're going to have to hold that retail license. So in 125 it does specify, and I'll have that on a later slide of what it says. Um, so typically a macro brewery does a lot more of that wholesale typically, or a lot more production than a brew pub itself. Brew pub business model is generally that they're brewing and then serving on site. So here we have the brew pub requirements. So this is in Wisconsin State Statute 125. They must operate a restaurant. That's how it's written in 125, and we can talk about that. But what we're looking at is that and something else that changed was the brew pub cannot manufacture more than 20,000 barrels in a calendar year, and that's talking about the brew pubs group. The brew pubs group is also defined in that 125 as a maximum of 6 brew pubs within that one group or one permit. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about that as a whole for those requirements. So that's something to keep in mind as we're moving forward. And they can also a brew pub, so they can. So one of the things that the fact sheet that I found from DOR talks about is, are they able to distribute directly to retailers? Brewer, no, and this is distributing directly to retailers. No, unless the brewer manufactures more than 300,000 barrels per year. The brew pub may self-distribute up to 2,000 barrels per retailers per year. Any other distribution must be through permitted beer wholesaler. Okay, similarities. So they both can sell fermented beverages retail on site. A brewer can hold a restaurant license. That's perfectly acceptable. And they can both wholesale fermented beverages. So there's a couple nuanced differences, but these are the similarities I wanted to just talk about, that these are the things that they are able to do together. Brewpub exemption. So this is written into state statute 97. So it's 97.29. You can see up there 1H3. But what it's talking about is a food processing plant. It goes on to define a food processing plant, but then it says food processing plant does not include any of the following. And then this exemption is talking about an establishment covered by a license or permit under Chapter 125, which I was just referencing with the brew pub, to sell alcoholic beverages if the food processing activities related to alcohol beverages at that establishment are limited to preparing individual servings of alcohol beverages that are sold on the premises in accordance with the terms of the establishment's license or permit under Chapter 125. So in this one, we're just talking about that exemption for the brew pub itself. And so that's written into state statute, and I think just an important note to highlight. Okay. Is everybody seeing a diagram here? My screen is blank.
It is blank, Charlie.
It is blank.
Awesome, fantastic. Okay, let me share my screen and we'll get this going the old-fashioned way. So, give me one moment here. My apologies. Okay. Can we all see it now?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is our handy dandy. I think this is a really great way. I'm a visual learner, so this kind of helps us understand what is happening in the brewing process. So the first start of it is malting. This initial stage involves soaking grains, typically that barley, in water to initiate germination, following by drying and roasting. Then we're going to move to milling, and that is the malted grain is crushed into a powder called grist, preparing it for mashing. Now, of course, some folks may not do the malting and milling. They might get in pre-milled grain. That's totally possible and totally a possibility for them. So if that is the case, you can, you're not going to worry about that first part of the step, which Carrie is going to go through and show you some of the equipment that is typically found out there. The next is mashing, so that grist is going to be mixed with hot water, and the resulting mixture steeps to extract sugars and enzymes. Then we're going to have the lautering. This step separates the sweet, sugary liquid wort from the spent grain. Typically that spent grain is going to be disposed of, might go to animal feed, otherwise it's just gotten rid of. The wort is boiled with hops added for flavor. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse up here, but this is where we are in the step or the process right there. So we add hops for flavor, bitterness, and aroma, as well as to sterilize that. We're going to cool it. So this is going to go through typically a plate heat exchanger, which you're seeing kind of a little bit a drawing up here of that. We are then going to go to the fermentation stage. So you're going to add yeast to that product. It's going to convert the sugars into alcohol, carbon dioxide, and flavors. You're going to condition it. Some folks will filter it. Some will not. I'm not sure if you've seen the unfiltered beers or whatever the case is, so that's also something that they can choose to do. After that, it's going to go into a holding tank, and then they're going to either bottle it or package it into bottles, cans, kegs, and that's going to be going out for distribution. So the fermentation, I want to kind of step back on a couple of things. So the fermentation can go for several days or weeks. It's strained and sent to the bright tank. Might be the same tank depending on the size of the facility. So that's something you might see as well as them using some of the same tanks for different operations, just depending on the size of the actual producer themselves. So I believe that is the end of mine, and I'm actually going to go ahead and go back to the way we were doing it. So give me 1 second here and I will share that via Teams. So one moment.
And Charlie, there was a request in chat for I believe the fact sheet. I don't know if you could easily drop it in chat. Otherwise, we can either do an announcement on SharePoint or email the attendees as well.
Yes, I can absolutely do that. So go ahead and resume. And Carrie, if you'd like to take over, that'd be fantastic.
All right. So we get a lot of questions on the variance and HACCP plan requirement, because when you make beer, it's a special process because there's some heat treatment of some plant foods in that. Years ago, I want to say back in 2005, FDA did take that out of the food code, and so Wisconsin followed suit that this would not be required for a variance and HACCP plan. So just keep that in mind. We do occasionally get questions, and that's an excellent question to ask because it tells me you're understanding what a TCS or time temperature control for safety food is, and that this is something, because of the nature of it, that really should have a variance and HACCP plan, but it is not specifically called out in 3-502.11. All right. So when we are doing inspections of these areas, I know it's different stuff. It's different things that you're looking at. Just remember, we want you to continue to do that risk-based inspection. So some examples of some physical hazards that you might see in a brewing area is broken glass. There's going to be some glass, especially if they're bottling. Make sure that there's a plan in place. If glass is broken, what is going to happen to that? And also beer, as Charlie mentioned, is filtered. And after that step, we are concerned with that as well. Biological concerns based on the water source, as it is the main ingredients. We want to make sure, again, that water is food, water is coming from an approved source. And that grain, we want to make sure that that grain is good. It is wholesome. We don't want moldy grain because moldy grain can create aflatoxins. So this is a very self-correcting process. If they're using bad ingredients, they're going to get bad beer. There are some chemical hazards as well. So your cleaning chemicals, your sanitizers, like the food code prescribes, we want to make sure they're properly using chemicals and they're properly storing them. If they have working bottles, that they are properly labeled. If adding chemical additives, they have a recipe or they know what is happening. So again, applying those food code principles, doing your risk-based inspection. Here are some examples. We're just going to go through some common equipment you can see in breweries. So this is just an example, like Charlie had said, of milling operations. Some will do their own milling. Sometimes they will already get that in. We have had questions about milling operation areas or rooms about putting in hand wash sinks because it is a separate processing area. We don't want moisture in these areas because then what's going to happen? We're going to get mold and then we're going to get those aflatoxins and we're going to have a bad product. So keep that in mind. You can always go that route if they have that separate milling room or area where there is not convenient access to a hand wash sink, where maybe a standard operating procedure could be in place. But we have discussed this when we have been in the field doing these types of joint inspections or training inspections. We really want to keep the moisture level down in these areas. So again, these are just some examples of equipment that you might see that is used for milling. Here is a hot liquor tank. So really what the liquor tank is, it's just basically hot and cold water storage. A lot of the tanks might look, quote, the same or similar in brewing operations. I will tell you, brewmasters are passionate about what they do. If you don't know what something is, ask. They love to talk about the process. They love to show off their facilities. They love to talk about the amazing beer that they're brewing. But again, this is just an example of a hot liquor tank. And here's an example of a mash tun. So as Charlie said, mashing so that milled grains are mixed with hot water to convert those starches into fermentable sugars. And then there's the lautering. So the mash is separated into a clear sugary liquid called the wort and spent grain. You can see a big, large stainless steel type vessel. Probably not going to see a handy dandy little NSF sticker on it or another ANSI accredited program type certification on these types of equipment. These are specialty made pieces of equipment, so keep that in mind as well. So when we're looking at these, we just want to make sure that they meet the requirements of Chapter 4 of the Food Code. So that there's cleanability, that they're smooth, that there's no cracks or crevices, that they can't wash, rinse, or sanitize. We are really not in the business right now with the equipment work group of looking at the specialty type of equipment. So this is really made and designed per specification of that establishment. So remember that as well. You probably won't see any of those certification stickers on some of these pieces of equipment that they're using. Here we have a kettle. So we have a kettle on the left. So again, that kettle, they're adding hops and our flavorings, and then they boil it depending on the recipe, and then go into a whirlpool. So this is the inside. This is kind of the whirlpool. Again, don't get all excited and start opening up any sort of these tanks. Always ask the brewmaster. I actually ask them to open it for me. I don't want to interrupt anything or not know what I'm doing. But here you can see that whirlpool, so it strains out any liquid from any particulates by swirling the water. They can then extract those unwanted hops. So again, when we're doing these inspections, you're going to want to look inside as well to make sure that they're in good condition and that they're clean. And you want to also ask questions about how they're cleaning them. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Because again, you're not going to take these and put them into a 3-compartment sink anywhere. So there is going to be some clean in place components that you're going to want to discuss. Here we have a plate heat exchanger. So this is going to complete the cooling operation. So plates are pushed close together. Hot liquid goes through the one side, cold through the other side, and it allows for rapid cooling. You want to ask them how often they're taking it apart, because it's not often, and it is a clean in place process. If it is leaking, it most likely is going to require maintenance, because if stuff is leaking out, that means stuff can get in. So remember that. Most of your establishments will have somebody come in and specifically do the cleaning of the plate exchanger. I have had people that say, oh, no, we do it, but it is a very intricate piece of equipment. So just ask some questions, look at it, make sure it's not leaking, make sure they have a plan in place for how often they are cleaning it. So here we have some fermentation tanks. I do want to point out, so you can see on the left, you might see a line running into a bucket of sanitizer from the fermentation tank. It's common. So fermentation is a metabolic process that converts that sugar into alcohol and releases carbon dioxide as a byproduct. This process is carried out by yeast, tiny microorganisms that consume the sugar present in the food or beverage being fermented. As the yeast feeds on the sugar, it produces alcohol and that carbon dioxide. So some larger breweries will capture the CO2 for later use. In this instance, it's just running into that bucket of sanitizer, so it's kind of capturing that gas there. On the right, you can see the tanks as well, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the storage of hoses. So you will see different types of filtering units. This is an optional step. So here on the left, you see that press plate filter. This is common in your smaller facilities. So plates can be one at a time use or cleanable. It's easier than the plate heat exchanger to clean and sanitize. So this might be something that they are doing themselves. Then we have a bottom is an inline filter, and that catches large particles. It's not really straining. And the top right is just an example of some disposable media. It kind of reminds me a little bit of a swimming pool. So again, if you don't know what something is, I don't know how many times I can reiterate this, just ask and they'll tell you. They'll tell you what it's used for. And then think of the food code, think of food code principles, your risk-based inspection, and then go from there and ask questions. So here we have a top left. This you're probably not going to see in your retail establishment. So this is a bigger place, a bottling operation. This is really expensive and complicated. In the bottom is a hand bottling unit. You will again see that concern with glass breakage. And if glass breaks, it is easier to clean up. You're not stopping a production line. We have bottle fillers, and again, they need to be made and constructed with food grade materials. We want to be sure that they are free of mold and stagnant water. So if you see them just sitting, start asking some questions. On the right, you have a kegging process. So what they're doing is they're putting the beer in there and they're using that CO2 or nitrogen. Again, we want to make sure those gases are food grade. So, ask the questions, look at the tanks and canisters. And the top middle is a can filling machine. So just some different examples of how they might, quote, package that final product. So cleaning in a brewery is going to be different but the same, shall we say. So when we think of cleaning in the brewery, really it takes energy to clean. So they can use mechanical energy or chemical energy or a combination of both, what you're going to see. So that mechanical energy to clean is hand scrubbing with an abrasive pad, impingement with directed jet of high pressure water. Your chemical energy is going to be specialty formulated detergents to remove specific soil loads. So commonly used cleaners in breweries, which is going to be different than you are used to seeing in your retail food establishment kitchens, are going to be caustic soda-based cleaners, non-caustic cleaners, and your acid-based cleaners. Sometimes the most effective cleaning method in a brewery is the combination of both. That mechanical, a little bit of elbow grease, or some high pressure spraying, or that chemical energy to break down the materials. So again, some common cleaning agents like I talked about is going to be your caustic soda cleaner, your non-caustic cleaner, and your acid cleaners. So this is an example of an acid cleaner on the left. Oh no, I think this is the next. No. Well, I thought I had a picture of here, sorry. You can Google the cleaners or search the cleaners. I just automatically say Google. But again, looking at the bottles, make sure that they are used for this type of process. Make sure they're meant for food type cleaning. Pre-soaking is common. You will see buckets of small pieces and parts soaking in buckets. It's typical. It's going to remove that heavy buildup and allow for that proper cleaning and sanitizing. Here are some other common cleaning agents, as I had mentioned. So you have just some different working containers here. We have a large bin of a chem station cleaner. So again, making sure to look at the cleaners and be sure that they are being used for what it is being prescribed that they're used for. Some common sanitizers. So these are some typical sanitizers you will see in brewing operations. Bleach, perioxylic acid, aka peracetic acid, which we've all heard that term, phosphoric acid, iodophor, chlorine dioxide, or pasteurization. Again, remember, sanitizers must be used in accordance with the directions for food contact surfaces, have a method of testing, and be EPA registered. So under 4-501.114, manual and mechanical warewashing equipment chemical sanitation, we have to think of temperature, pH, concentration, and hardness. And a chemical sanitizer used in a sanitizing solution for manual or mechanical operation at contact times as specified under paragraph 4-703.11c shall meet the criteria as specified in section 7-204.11. So again, we want to make sure EPA registration, directions for food contact surfaces, and a testing method. If pasteurization is used, it must follow the food code for heat sanitizing. So pasteurization, just plain heat, hold at 180 degrees for 30 minutes or more is typical for your brewing operations. So just again, and here's an example of a bucket of a parasitic acid that is commonly used in a brewing operation. So when we think of cleaning the inside of these large tanks, this is, I call it the sanitizer, the cleaning disco ball. So this you can see is a sprayer. So what this sprayer is going to do, it's usually somewhere in the top of the kettle, I want to say container, but they're not containers because they're much larger than containers. This is going to spray out your cleaner, it's going to do that wash, rinse, sanitize, that clean in place. I kind of think of when you go into like a grocery store meat department and they have that spray hose and they spray it down and they do that foaming wash, then they switch it and they do that rinse, and then they switch it and they do that sanitize. This is, in essence, that little spray ball is doing that same thing inside whatever, the kettle, the mash tun, that is doing that same kind of clean in place, wash, rinse, sanitize. So some common violations you might see. Typically a big one is the hand wash sink used for washing utensils. Again, make sure they have a separate hand wash sink. Some of our older facilities may not have a 3 or 4 compartment sink depending on the facility. So they might be using the restaurant operations. Be aware if this is the case, that they're careful with what kind of cleaners and sanitizers they're using if they're bringing some of the stuff into the kitchen. Just being safe, toxic wise as well, because with these brewing operations, different types of cleaners and sanitizers might be used, but make sure that they're properly doing this as well. Clutter, I think all of us have seen clutter in one way, shape, or form while we've been doing inspections. So again, clutter is a common violation, possibly some issues with rodents in areas they don't go into, or if they are doing some milling. We know that these little rodents love these bags of dry goods to nibble into and get into. Look for water leaking from equipment where it should not be leaking. Like I mentioned earlier, the plate heat exchanger. As I said, if the water is leaking, that means hazards can be getting in. We want to be sure that there's proper backflow throughout the establishment. So again, applying your food code principles, chapter 5, backflow. So if there's hose hookups, we want to make sure they have backflow. We want to be sure hoses are stored up off the ground. This picture is pretty good. So again, we don't want hoses sitting on the floor. If you've been in brewing operations, you know it's pretty wet. We want to keep them as clean and dry as possible. So we don't want to kind of leave them laying around. They should be trying to avoid pooled water with the hoses. And once those hoses are dry, they should be capped to avoid potential contamination. So you might want to ask some additional questions on how they're handling those hoses. Look at gaskets and ensure they are clean. Mold is a concern. Do not, as I said, open a tank without the guide, or just ask someone to help you. They love to talk about their process. So, make sure not to go and get all excited and start opening stuff up. Always ask. As you will hear, these are very damp, humid environments. Mold is common. It is a good environment, for it is nice and moist. Charlie has seen some great examples of some mold in brewing operations. Charlie, what's the worst?
There's a spot, and I can't remember. I'm not going to say what it is, but they were fermenting product, and their whole back wall was just all mold on the bottom. So it was almost like a yearly process of them removing the mold and starting, cleaning it and then repainting it and doing all these things to mitigate because it's just such it's a good environment for it. So yeah, that was one that I would often write up in these larger breweries is worried about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, thinking of like surfaces, look at the surfaces, make sure they're smooth, non-absorbent, easy to clean. Also, we didn't touch on it. I always look at the beer lines as well, asking questions on how they're cleaning those beer lines if they're providing the tap beer. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then Carrie, could you move to the next slide, please?
Yep.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I just want to touch on the TTB. You can see up there, breweries and brew pubs must comply with federal requirements. So they're going to need to they're going to need to file a notice and obtain approval from the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. That is within the U.S. Department of Treasury, and so they're going to need to be doing some of those steps as well. One of the major things that the TTB looks at is ensuring that they are complying with labeling requirements. So I would do a label check, but really what I'm expecting is that the TTB is doing some of that heavy lifting and taking a look at those to make sure that they're meeting their requirements. I would suggest just get folks in touch with this agency. Just have them start that conversation if there's like a licensing inspection, or if you're just starting off with like a phone call to get things moving with them. Just say, hey, have you contacted this agency? Maybe provide a link to their site to start that, but that would be my suggestion.